I don't know if people are aware, but there was an earthquake recently in Afghanistan. And as you can imagine, a country like Afghanistan, it's not got the buildings like Tokyo does that wobble with an earthquake. It's got buildings like England does. So when there's an earthquake, the buildings come crashing down. And I'm reading from the New York Times. So this is a mainstream media outlet, not some right-wing propaganda outfit. And it talks about this. The title is, "After Afghan quake, many male rescuers help men, but not women. A prohibition on contact between unrelated women and men meant many women's wounds went untended and some were left trapped under rubble after a deadly earthquake," witnesses said. The author of this article is that well-known right-wing Christian evangelist Fatima Faizi. And she put this: "The first rescue workers reached Bibi Aisha's village more than 36 hours after an earthquake devastated settlements across eastern Afghanistan's mountainous areas on Sunday. But instead of bringing relief, the sight of them heightened her fears. Not a single woman was amongst them. Afghan cultural norms, enforced even in emergencies by the ruling Taliban, forbid physical contact between men and women who are not family members. In the village of Andalukak in Kunar province, the emergency team hurriedly carried out wounded men and children and treated their wounds," said Aisha, 19. "But she and other women and adolescent girls, some of them bleeding, were pushed aside." She said, "No one offered women help, asked what they needed, or even approached them." Tazibullah Muhazeb, a male volunteer who travelled to Mazar Dara, also in Kunar province, said that members of the all-male medical team there were hesitant to pull women out from under the rubble of collapsed buildings. Trapped and injured women were left under stones, waiting for women from other villages to reach the site and dig them out. The reason for this, ladies and gentlemen, is that under Islamic fiqh, free mixing is considered a sin. Free mixing is the idea that men will have social interaction with women they don't know. Just to point out the hypocrisy of the Muslims in the park, that never stops the Muslims in the park trying to chat up white bait here in the park, because they do like white bait here in the park, and suddenly social norms go out of the window when it has the opportunity for a Muslim man to talk to a non-Muslim woman. But you don't see them doing it. You see them getting aggravated when Christian men talk to Muslim women. And then they lecture us about the idea of the separation of the genders and the sexes. This idea has been taken to an extreme in Afghanistan, where women, according to the legitimate Islamic fiqh of the Taliban, has said that women cannot be seen or heard in public, even to the point of blocking up windows so that women cannot be seen from windows, ladies and gentlemen. Women in Afghanistan have been denied the opportunities of education because according to Islamic fiqh of the Taliban, which is legitimate according to other Islamists and other Muslims, like the Muslims we have in this park, say that women, it's haram for them to learn. The reason why they deny the social interaction is because they believe that by doing so, it gives license to sin. Because of course, the first thing you're thinking about after an earthquake is shagging someone who's bleeding to death. And that's what she wants as well, of course. This is the backward 7th century mindset of Islam. However, Christ offers us an answer to this. And the answer we read in the Gospel of Luke, reading from chapter 10, verse 25 and onwards. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said unto him, What is written in the law? How read you? And he answered and said, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus answered and said, You have answered right. This do, and you shall live. But he said, willing to justify himself, Jesus, who then is my neighbor? And the Christ replied, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell amongst thieves, who stripped him of his clothing and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked at him and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him, and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and setting him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the next day when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the innkeeper, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever you spend more, when I come, I will repay you. Which now of these 3 think you was neighbour unto him that fell amongst the thieves? And he said, He that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go and do likewise. Now, the Christ was talking about a parable as a Jew, and he made a Samaritan the hero of the story. In other words, he made someone of a different ethnos, a different nation, a different religion, the hero of his own story, thus demonstrating how counterintuitive the teachings of Jesus is to any kind of ethno-nationalism. But he criticized the priest and the Levite. Why? Because they had interpreted the law in terms of ritual purification rather than ethically. This was not Jesus contradicting the law of the priests and the Levites, but saying to the priests and the Levites that they had misunderstood the purpose of the law. The priests had understood it in terms of ritual purification for the temple, whereas, and so For instance, Cornelius of Lepida says this, and by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed on the other side. By chance, humanly speaking, but really by the providence of God, for all things are foreordained by God, passed by on the other side. The priest, terrified at his appearance, turned away from him and went on the other side. George Leo Haydock said, our Saviour here shows the Jewish priest how preposterous was their behaviour, who though scrupulously exact in performing all external acts of religion, entirely neglected piety, mercy, and other essential duties. And that is the problem with Islam. Islam emphasizes external duties, external acts, external responsibilities. And for that reason, those Afghan women were left under rubble to die, because the Afghan Taliban could not bear rescue men to physically touch women who they were not related to, because they see that as haram. But Christ teaches us that there's nothing wrong with external religiosity, but external religiosity must always serve the inner dynamic of ethic and the dynamism of love. And so, if external purity or exactitude should be sacrificed because love or mercy demands it, then you sacrifice it. Jesus practiced worship in the temple. He himself practiced and was raised to follow the religious purity laws. As the fulfillment of the law, he would have observed all the Jewish law, and he commanded Jews to do the same until all things had been accomplished. And when all things accomplished, a new divine royal law was established in the new covenant. The command of love, that how you treat your neighbor is how you treat yourself, that you love your neighbor as you love yourself. And how does he define neighbor? He defines neighbor as the one in need. Those women of Afghanistan were in need, and because of Islam they were failed. They were left to bleed. They were left in the cold. They were left under rubble. They were left to die. Now, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, which religion would have served the people of Afghanistan better this week? The religion of Islam or the religion of Christianity, which would have said to those men, forget about modesty, drag those naked women out from under the rubble, and then give them clothes, and then tend to their bleeding wounds with your own hands, and feed them, and comfort them, and talk to them, and reassure them until women nurses can come and then take over the care. Which religion did the Afghan people need this week? Islam or Christianity? Sorry, let me just finish, sir. I'm doing a talk. I'll take questions at the end. Islam has failed those women. Christ, when he went into Mary's house, Mary and Elizabeth, and remember, one of the sisters was busy doing the work, and the other sister was sat learning at Jesus' feet. And one sister complained to the other and said, "Lord, she leaves me to prepare everything while she's just sitting there listening to you." And Jesus said, "No, she has chosen the better part, to learn from me." To learn from me. Jesus sanctifies women's education. Jesus believed in women's education. And yet, the Taliban have denied women's education to women in Afghanistan because they say it is haram. The liberal Western secular world abandoned Afghanistan to a bunch of Islamist thugs. If the West had been guided by Christianity, we would still be in Afghanistan fighting to civilize the country and to free it from Islam, to draw it closer to Christ, in which those women would be educated, in which those women would be allowed out of the home, in which those women would not have been left under the rubble to die. Afghanistan needs Christendom, not the Caliphate. Afghanistan needs a Christian state and Christian law, not Sharia law. Jesus said, "You will know them by their fruits, and by their fruits you will know them." The Taliban have demonstrated their fruits. I have demonstrated the fruits of Christianity. Are these Afghan women Christians? No, they're Muslim women. I'm speaking up for Muslim women. Why? Because I love the Muslim women more than the Muslim men of Afghanistan. I am speaking up for the Muslim women of Afghanistan when all of these Islamists in this country and this pathetic troll here has done nothing to speak up for them. And so, ladies and gentlemen, he trolls because he knows no one would listen to him if he stood over there and talked. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have given you a living example of the superiority of Christian teaching over Mohammedan teaching. And this is not the first time that an incident like this has happened in the Islamic world. Decades ago, there was a fire in a Muslim school, in a Muslim gymnasium for women. And the women ran out of the gymnasium in their sports clothes. And do you know what the religious male police did to those women? Did they say, "Yes, come away from the fire, we'll help you, and we'll bring you covering, and we'll bring you water," like a Christian man would have done? No. Do you know what they did? They took out their batons and they beat the women back into the flames. And the women burned to death and died in that school in Saudi Arabia because of Islamic teaching. So my statement to all you Muslims and all you idiotic trolls is that Islam is the problem and Christianity is the answer.